think, Rushanara, you have one very quick question, I think, on this.
Just on this topic, I had one quick question. Adam, you were talking about the international effect and how some countries that are used to crises or emergencies are faring quite well, and one could characterize that as they're much more resilient but resource poor. We're more resource rich but less resilient in coping with this stuff. But one of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is the disruption to supply chain, multinationals, Western multinationals cancelling orders to things like the garment sector in countries like Bangladesh. And I just wondered whether you or other colleagues have done any research into understanding to what extent are contracts being cancelled or orders being cancelled, and what amount, how much does it amount to? I know that in relation to that one country in one sector, garment sector, it's about over 4 billion, and UK multinationals not paying up is about 2.4 billion. Is there any research being undertaken on what the impact of our trading relationships and how our companies behave is having on those countries? Because on top of dealing with the pandemic, they are then facing the double risk and threat of their workers not being able to be paid for work they've done or started to do.
No, Ms. Ali, I think that's right. I just want to be very clear. When I speak about the resilience of some of these resource poor countries, as you rightly put it, I want to stress that that's versus a baseline, and particularly specifically in public health, that a lot of people were fearing very large numbers of deaths. Yeah. And God, and thank the actions of those people in those countries, that we're seeing an order of magnitude less deaths than we feared, which is a miracle. It doesn't mean that they're for now. No, exactly. And we don't know the data, and we will see. But just, you know, I just want to say, I'm not saying everything's wonderful and I'm complacent. I just want to recognize progress. On your more important point about the supply chains, others may have other sources of data. We do not have a log at Peterson of all these aspects. What we do see is that what we're seeing is a reallocation and duplication of supply chains, that particularly in advanced manufacturing, we're already seeing not so much people pulling out of, say, China, but they're building duplicate facilities and redundant facilities and additional capacity in other places, usually closer to the home base of these companies. And so relating to the previous comment, there is an issue of greater divergence across the world, that multinationals are going to have sort of one supply chain and system for feeding it to China, one for North America, one for Europe. For the countries like, I think of in Nepal in the garment trade, for example, which may or may not be what you were referring to, which has been very badly hit in this situation, I think you have to separate the issue between multinationals canceling contracts or failing to make payments versus supply chain shifting. Not in any ethical sense, just in a practical sense. Yeah. The first category, the canceling and the failure to pay, are legal contracting issues, and it's worth people looking at whether, you know, it's just like I remember when I was at the MPC in the UK, it was always the small vendor who was getting abused by the company further up the value chain, who was delaying payments or rescinding or renegotiating, you know, how much margin you got. And I think that is an ongoing issue that has to be dealt with. In terms of the supply chains changing, however, I am more confident that that will come back over time, that is a temporary interruption, particularly in things like garments, because the weird side of the fact that there are industries that are very low income is that there aren't that many other places to move them, and it's not very cost efficient to replace them with capital. I mean, it varies from specific sector and specific country, but the bottom line is where people in the poorer developing countries are part of global supply chains, it's because they are the cheapest option and they give good value to those companies. I mean, putting it bluntly. So again, I would support and encourage people in international law to be looking at ways of better enforcing contracts and limiting the abuse the multinationals can put on their suppliers. But I think in terms of the supply chain utilization, I'm more confident about its robustness.
Great. Thank you very much.